right, welcome. So, a quick little introduction about me. My name is Courtney Landine. I have been helping parents for going on 10 years now with sleep. Um, what I do is I actually work with parents in the realms of training, nutrition, um, sleep, and mindset. So, I'm a family health coach, and I am able to help parents in many different aspects. So, when I take the topic of sleep, I'm also incorporating other parts as well. So sometimes that's going to be talking about nutrition because nutrition definitely affects sleep. We're going to talk about sometimes how much activity a child's getting. I mean, obviously, when they're babies, it's going to be a little bit like, okay, most likely they're getting enough activity just because they're babies. But with older kids, that factor might come into play. So, like I said, I've been coaching parents for about going on 10 years now. And the quick version of why I started doing this is because I struggled with my own daughter's sleep. Now, when she was born, I had studied everything that I could about sleep. I felt pretty prepared, but honestly, I wasn't prepared enough. And she was born and she cried a lot. Like we could never put her down. Like never. Not even for 30 minutes. I mean, we bought every gadget we could, and she would just be screaming the whole entire time. So it was really exhausting. And so fast forward 6 months of doing that. So holding her every time she was sleeping, never putting her down, literally sitting on the couch and sitting up and sleeping. And if I stopped moving for 30 minutes, where that? It was, to say it nicely, a living hell. Finally, we found out that she had a milk protein allergy and was allergic to peanuts, hence her being unhappy most of the time. Now, most of you aren't in that situation, thank goodness, but it's something to think about. If you have a young baby who is very fussy, sometimes it actually can come down to an allergy of some sort, them being uncomfortable. A lot of that comes down to kids not being able to know how to comfort themselves because they're babies and we are their comfort. So that's how I started getting into coaching parents myself. I love what I do. I love being able to help mamas and papas that are tired and really showing them that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, so what we're going to do today is I'm going to share my screen and we're going to walk through reasons why we have night waking. So let me just share my screen here. And going into that. And let's just hope technology is on our side. I do webinars often, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Okay, why am I not getting my little hide? There we are. Now, hopefully everyone can see my screen. I'm gonna move myself here so I'm not blocking. All right, let's get into tips for night wakings. Now, first things first, let's understand how sleep actually works, because waking up is very normal. I know that's not what you want to hear, but waking up is actually very normal for young babies. So here's what happens when we sleep. So when we're falling asleep, we are in what's called stage 1 light sleep. So in light sleep, what happens is our bodies are basically just relaxing. We're trying to relax and get ready to fall asleep. We are very aware during this stage. Now, you probably noticed this when maybe you're feeding your baby to sleep, they look like they're totally conked out, and then all of a sudden you go to put them down and boom, they are wide awake. That is light sleep. They are not fully asleep just yet. This is also if you think about yourself, you're laying in your bed. Now, if you're overtired, you're probably falling asleep quite quickly and you don't even remember falling asleep or laying in bed or laying your head on their pillow. But when you aren't sleep deprived, what happens is you lay on the bed, you're laying there for about 10 to 15 minutes trying to relax. Now, technically, this is a light stage of sleep. So what happens if we're not woken up is that we go into stage 2. It is a light sleep, but a little bit deeper. So thinking about ourselves, if we are kind of shaken or we hear a noise or something, and you wake up and you're like, oh, okay, I was falling asleep, that's stage 2. Now, stage 2 is also similar to for babies when you're feeding them and you think they're asleep, you put them down, maybe they're kind of like, oh, okay. Like 2 minutes later, they're like, bing, I am not asleep. That's also stage 2. So they might wake up after maybe 2 minutes or like 5. So if we are not woken up, we actually go into what's called stage 3 sleep. So this is a deep, slow wave sleep. What that means by slow wave is that our brain patterns basically change. So like the electrical impulses in our brains slow down. This is when our bodies are restoring themselves. So this is when your immune system strengthens. This is when little babies grow. So this is the only time during their sleep stage that growth hormone is put into their body. Deep sleep is very hard to be woken out of. So this will happen when basically someone has to really shake you awake. Or it's like you wake up finally from hearing your baby cry and you're like, oh man, where am I? And it kind of takes you a few like minutes to really fully wake up. That is deep sleep. Babies during deep sleep, you will know that they're in deep sleep. They are like conked out. You can see that their breath is very slow because our breathing rate slows down, our heart rate slows down. You have to maybe kind of double check, like, she's still breathing, right? That's deep sleep. That's when you can like lift up their arm and then it'll fall back down. That's when you can move them anywhere. They'll still stay asleep. So that is deep sleep. Now, deep sleep, once we finish that stage, we go into what's called rapid eye movement, REM sleep. So this is when we're dreaming. This is when our brain is actually filing away all of the memories, all the things that we learned from that day into our brain. So we'll remember dreaming. Most of the time we dream in color during this stage, and most of the time we remember as well. So what's really important to know is that we don't go through that one time at nighttime. We go through that many different times during the night. So all of those sleep stages that I just talked about equals one sleeping cycle, and then we repeat it. So technically, adults, we have anywhere between 60 to 120 minutes of these sleeping cycles where we have one of those cycles and we're repeated again. Children have them for about 30 to 90 minutes. Now, this is why they tend to wake us up in deep or REM sleep, because their sleep cycle is much shorter than ours. Fun, right? And then, as you can see on my chart here, we cycle through those all throughout the night. So when you can see that we're like in that deep stage, we go back up to light, REM, light, deep, back and forth, whole night through. And we have little micro wakings. And most of the time when we're having these micro wakings as adults, we know we can fall back to sleep. We've been doing it for years. It's no problem. But for kids, it's a little different. I'm going to explain why in a second, but it's a little bit different for kids. And they wake up a lot more and they let us know that they're awake. Now, one really, really, really important thing to point out on this chart is that if you notice, deep sleep tends to happen to about 3 a.m.-ish. And then after that, there isn't any. Now, that's not what happens all the time. If you are sleep deprived, you will be getting deep sleep in past 3 a.m. and your body's trying to make up that deep sleep time because it's a very important stage for our bodies. In a normal sleeping pattern, though, we don't have deep sleep most of the time past that 3 a.m. mark because our hormones in our bodies are changing. They're getting us ready to wake up during the day. So you'll probably notice that your baby has a lot more wakings starting from about 2-ish in the morning and onwards. And the reason is because our sleep cycles change and we don't have as much deep sleep. Now, adults, we usually have about 5 or 6 of these cycles per night. If we're giving ourselves like enough time to actually sleep, 7-ish hours. Obviously, there'll be less than that if we're not getting that, time of sleep that we actually need. And babies obviously have more cycles than that. Now, I know that my picture here is blocking what I'm just going to talk about here. But basically, what happens is that waking up around 30 minutes, 60 minutes, or maybe even 90 minutes on a regular basis at nighttime tells me, as a sleep coach, that there's something going on there. That child does not know how to fall back to sleep. So that leads me to ask, how does your baby fall asleep at night? Now, when I have someone who has lots of night wakings, which you guys are experiencing, that is the first question that I will ask. So I want you to think right now, okay, how is my baby falling asleep? Now, most of the answers are going to come down to what are called sleep props. Now, there are positive sleep props, there are what's called like negative sleep props, okay? A sleep prop is anything that helps your child fall asleep, but it can cause wake ups. Like I said, there are positive ones and there are negative ones. So right now, I'm going to go over the negative ones. So most of the time, nursing, breastfeeding, bottle feeding to sleep can cause wake ups. Rocking, using a pacifier can cause wake ups. Co-sleeping can cause wake ups. Now, let me just say, because I know I did all this too, so no judgment, and we do what we need to survive. But if we want to reduce some of these night wakings and get that proper sleep, then we need to look at kind of reducing some of these things. Now, like I said, these things are all okay. I did them, lots of parents do them. I even still encourage some for some parents, depending on what their situation is. The thing is these things are okay until no one's sleeping. So if you're having multiple wake ups of the night and you're helping your child fall asleep using these things, then I know, all right, that child's using this specific thing to help fall asleep. And when they come back into that light stage of sleep, when they're like, hey, this is not how I fell asleep, help me fall back to sleep, then I know that we need to help that kiddo learn how to fall back to sleep in a much better way. Now, we as adults also have sleep props. Now, say, for example, you wake up and your pillow's gone, right? Now, if we're in a light state of sleep, most of the time, you're going to wake up and be like, oh, man, this isn't, like, where's my pillow, right? You're aware that your pillow is gone. So we tend to wake up a little bit more, and then we find our pillow, and once we have our pillow, we can fall back to sleep again. Same concept here when we have either feeding to sleep, rocking to sleep, pacifier, co-sleeping, things like that. Your baby is falling to sleep because that's how they're taught to fall asleep, which is fine, but they need that thing again to be able to fall back to sleep. So first things first then, or second, really, because first things first was how we sleep and why we have those wake ups, but how do we actually help solve those? So I'm going to talk about a day routine. You're probably thinking like, wait, why are we talking about day routine when we're talking about night waking? And the reason is because whatever we do during the daytime helps set up for nighttime sleep. So a consistent routine. This doesn't have to be like super strict, but in a general way of waking up, having some food, playing a little bit. Sometimes before going back to sleep again, we have a little snack, and then we're sleeping again. Now, I'm sure many of you are already following some sort of like routine very similar to this. This isn't like rocket science. This is talked about a lot with baby sleep. So wake, eat, play, sleep routine. Sometimes it's called an easy routine. So there's many different names for it, but basically it's all the same concept. You want to be following a day routine. Now, why do we want to follow a day routine? And why I'm going to talk about routines quite often is because there's a huge science behind why routines work. As boring as they might be, they really help your baby sleep. So the reason is because our bodies work on schedules and routines. We do this as adults too. So routines help our brains relax. We actually put less stress on our brain when we have a routine. A good example of this is when you wake up in the morning time. We tend to do the same things all the time, right? We wake up the same way in the morning. Get out of bed, go use the bathroom, maybe, I have retainers, so I take my retainers out, brush those, getting dressed, and then going in the kitchen. And then after that, you tend to do the same things. Like grab my glass of water, maybe I'll make a tea or a coffee, sit, get my kiddo ready for school. Right? We do the same things. And the reason is because it puts less stress on our brains because we don't have to think. We don't have to think about what happens. And babies are the exact same way. The other thing is our bodies react to patterns. So our bodies are in these natural sleep and awake cycles constantly. So our bodies go through these 90-minute cycles all throughout the day where we're having certain chemicals put in our bodies where we're like, well, we're awake. And then we kind of have a little dip. We need a break. We need the small little mental pause. Then we go and we get more energy again, right? So we go through these cycles all the time. And babies are the same. They have these little cycles they go through where they need to be awake and they need to be asleep. The next thing is really important too, especially for babies, is that we have something called metabolic memory. And that is how our bodies digest food. So if we're eating on regular times throughout the day, your body actually will digest the food more properly. So it's easier because what happens is your body is used to eating food. It starts putting in the correct hormones to digest that food, and voila. And babies are very, very similar. Okay, so how do you set up the correct routines for your kiddo? So what I do is I actually base it off two things. First thing is clocks. So awake time window. How long can your baby actually be awake? Because what contributes to nighttime wakings is being overtired as well. So if a baby's way overtired, they will have crappier sleep at nighttime as well. So you want to be watching the awake time window for your child. I'll explain more about that in just a second. And also cues. So sleepy signs. What signs does your child show you when they're ready to fall asleep? Now, these can be really clear signs. I don't always use yawning though, because you can wake up and still be yawning. So I don't really tend to use yawning unless you know for sure that that is your child's cue as to, oh, I'm tired. Generally, I'll use red eyebrows. The eyes can start looking tired. For older babies, they tend to get clumsier. They can't walk as well. They can't like play. They start getting cranky. That goes for young babies too. They get cranky, obviously. They just start getting fussy. Some babies will pull their ears. So that's as I whack my hair, they'll pull their ears. I had one client who this was really interesting because her baby showed very few sleepy signs. So when I did some in-home visits with them and I spent some more time with them, I noticed that her daughter would give a sigh. That was her sleepy cue. So the second she heard that sigh, we knew, all right, it's time to start getting ready for sleep within about the next 10 minutes because we started noticing that if she gave that sigh, we didn't pay attention. We did pay attention, but then we didn't start getting her ready for sleep. She started getting very cranky within that 10-minute mark. So really subtle clues sometimes. I know my own daughter had like zero clues either. I mean, it literally, she would go from super happy to just cranky pants, like disaster. So I knew that she didn't have many signs and I had to watch more of the clocks, so the wake time windows. So clocks and cues can be really helpful to set up your child's awake time window. Now, this is an ideal schedule. This is around the 3 naps time. This can be anywhere from, well, depending on your baby, can be around 6 months. Most babies around 6 months are still taking 4, but they're generally moving out of the 4 nap time. So around 6-ish months, you'll be seeing the 3 naps until about, again, really dependent on the child, but it can be anywhere between like 14 months. So 3 naps, you're waking up and you're doing that simple pattern. You wake up, you have some food, you play a little bit, and you're getting ready for nap time. Now, you want to have a like set nap times, and that goes back to having your body in that routine. Because once your child knows that like sleep is going to be happening after we do these things, sleep happens a lot more naturally. You'll have less fussing, you'll have just easier time falling asleep, you'll have a little bit longer nap times as well. So having those set nap times. Now, the other thing to point out is around the 6, 7 month mark, you really want to be having bedtime around 6:30 to 7, 18:30 to 19. The reason is because that chart that I showed you with going into light, and deep, and REM sleep is because we need that time to get in enough of that deep sleep. Now, if we lose that time, we lose that deep sleep window. So we have less quality sleep, we are way more tired, and that tends to cause more wake ups, overtiredness, crankiness, you name it. So you're probably wondering, where do I find an age schedule, or how do I know how many naps my baby needs? So I have a small resource on my site, and if you're signed up on my newsletter, you will get this as a link as well, but you'll just go to happysleepingbaby.com/parent-resources. If you go to happysleepingbaby.com, you will see it right at the top, as you see on the picture here. So I have a few examples of different age schedules from newborn to toddler age. And that just gives you a little window of, okay, around this age, how many naps should my baby be taking? So then that brings us to the most important part. You have to have those things we just talked about in place because that does help sleep 100%. But how does your baby fall to sleep? Because generally, when we're helping our kids fall to sleep, they need that same thing when they wake up at night. So the first thing is having a nap routine and a bedtime routine. So let's talk about nap time routine. Generally, this is about anywhere, I say 10 on here, but it can be 5 minutes up to 20 minutes maximum. You do not want your nap time routine to be very long because then your kiddo will lose the point of it. So I generally like to have like a 10-minute window of time to get ready for nap time. And this can be where you're having some sort of feeding. Now, feeding is going to be a really important aspect. So nap time routine, like I mentioned, anywhere from about 10 to 20 minutes. I usually go a little bit on the shorter side. Now, I have feeding to sleep in the beginning of this nap time routine because most of the time we're having some sort of sleeping prop used to help our kiddos fall asleep. So generally it's feeding or using like a pacifier. So let's just use the feeding example because that's the most common one that I see. So you want to have the feeding earlier in the bedtime or nap time routine. Then you'll be going into the room. I'll explain room environment just in a few minutes. And you'll go into a nice, calm, quiet, dark room. I like to have parents either read a book by like a dim light or sing a song. For nap time, I tend to do more of a song because it's a little bit faster. And then kiddos tend to start learning, okay, when I sing this song, this is what happens. Now I get it. You're probably saying, if I put my child to sleep and they're awake in their bed without feeding, I get it. They're probably going to scream their heads off. And that's not what I want at all. Now, generally, when we do change like a sleeping prop, like feeding to sleep, there will be some fuss. Now, after they learn that, okay, we don't feed to sleep, then they tend to become a lot better with sleep, like on their own. My last client, actually, this is exactly what happened. We worked on the feeding to sleep association, and then Babe just kind of started falling asleep without too much of a fuss when he started being put down. Now, before we put baby down, so we're going to usually incorporate another sleeping prop. So say, for example, you're feeding to sleep. So we feed at the beginning of the nap time routine. We go in the dark room. We're holding baby laying down, and we're singing and we're rocking. And we help put this baby to sleep this way. And then we're putting them down. Now, this is kind of a bit of a process. I'm not going to go into exactly what I do because I have a book that actually outlines everything that you need to do for that. But basically, the short version is you're holding the sleep and then you're putting down, and then you're lessening that time. You move to just standing and maybe patting, where you can then lay down and then pat baby. So trying to be maybe not awake but sleepy just yet, but using another sleep prop to help incorporate sleep and then working on that. Now, the same thing applies for stroller naps too. You want some sort of sleeping routine. So I know another client, they go ahead, they do the feeding, they put on the sleeping sack, and baby gets put down and he knows, boom, that is sleepy time, and that works too. So going into then bedtime routine, generally bedtime routine around 30 to 40 minutes. Now, this is, again, we don't want it any longer than that because they tend to lose the point. You want it kind of short and as sweet as possible. So bath time, obviously, if you have bath time part of nighttime routine, it's going to take a little bit longer. So, maybe towards the 40 minutes. You put on PJs, you put on the diaper, you do a feeding then, and then you do the book and song, or book or song, and then to the bed as well. Same thing. If you're feeding to sleep, what I like to have people do is holding and rocking first, kind of moving away from that sleep association to a different one, a little bit easier one to break, or reduce, I should say, and then putting baby down. Now, I always help babies fall to sleep, even if you're laying them down. So sometimes if you're laying really close to them and just having a hand on them, and then you move a little bit further away over a period of night. This is a process. I don't want you to think that this is going to solve everything within one day. Generally, when I'm working with clients, it can go anywhere from, I see really great improvements between 3 to 4 days to anywhere to 3 weeks. So it does take a lot of repetition and a lot of learning these new routines for them and also for you. Okay, so I talked shortly about room atmosphere. Now, room atmosphere really does help for sleep. It needs to be dark. It needs to be cool, not cold, just cool. So a little bit cooler than what our normal daytime temperature is for the day. And then some sort of white noise is always a good thing. Not every baby needs it, but I tend to see that it helps a ton. So white noise, if you're not familiar with that, is something that just kind of drowns out the other noises that are in the home. So they have white noise machines. I usually tend to use fans. Even in the wintertime, it's not obviously a fan that's blowing on the child. It's just maybe in the corner of the room and it's blowing in a different direction. It actually helps circulate the air and also keeps it a little bit cooler too. Then the other thing is having a sleeping buddy. Now, age appropriate, of course, but I tend to have parents start using a sleeping buddy actually sooner rather than later, because we tend to have stuff around all the time, blankets, things like that. It can be, like I said, a blanket. It can be like a little, in Sweden we call them snuffifilt, like a snuffifilt, like a little cozy thing. So I like the little guys with the little head and the little blanket body. Those ones are perfect. And even with young babies, I will recommend that you start putting it near them while they're falling asleep. Obviously, when they are asleep, I tend to move that away just because I don't want that to be a safety issue. But for older kids, then they'll always know, okay, my sleeping buddy's there, and that's what I hold on to. That tends to work really well if you're also moving away from a pacifier association to sleep. So using the sleeping buddy, you might see that they bite it or they suck on it, and that's totally fine. The same thing goes for biting or sucking on hands. I know lots of parents get worried, okay, is my child going to become a thumb sucker? Most likely not. Most of the time, they're just using that as self-soothing, which is actually a positive way for self-soothing, for them just to kind of gnaw on their hands, and that tends to not be an issue later. I really don't see that as something that continues on even after 10 years. It's maybe trying to think if I even had it happen once with someone continued sucking their thumb. I don't think I have. But basically, you want to stimulate the womb even now. Same thing applies for us as adults. We actually want this exact same environment. We want it dark as possible. We want it as cool as, let me try to think. It depends on the home, but 19, 18 degrees Celsius is typically a really good sleeping temperature. And if you're not familiar with Celsius, that's around 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, this will depend on the season as well. So this can actually help increase nighttime sleep, decrease nighttime wakings, increase nighttime sleep with just having the right room environment. Now, there's each of those points I could go into a little bit more detail, but just in general, blanket statement of this is your room atmosphere that I want you to shoot for. The next thing is having some sort of sleeping phrase. And what this means is it's basically just a reminder that it's sleeping time. It's also, it becomes a source of comfort for your child too. So say, for example, you're just holding and rocking and patting. It's like, okay, it's time to sleep now. We love you. Night, night. And then putting down. And you want to be saying this phrase every single time your child is going to sleep. So nap times and night times, even in the middle of the night too. It's a reminder to fall asleep. Now, they're not going to get it obviously in the beginning that this is their reminder to fall asleep, but they will once they start hearing it over and over and over and over again. So questions that I generally get asked, especially with working with a lot of multicultural families. Can you say it in different languages? Yes, totally fine. Can mom or one parent say one thing and another parent say another thing? Totally fine. Just make sure that you're saying your thing all the time and your other partner is saying their thing all the time as well. So just so that it's consistent, that's all that it really matters. Now, in the beginning, when we're making changes, generally kiddos aren't going to know what's going on. Now, I usually do this or having like a helping phrase, more of like when a baby's being put down, and let's say that they're maybe just a little bit fussy, they're not fully asleep, which is what we want at least a little bit further down the road, where they're still a little bit awake and we're helping them fall asleep. So sometimes I can have a parent say, like maybe a little older kiddo, okay, it's time to lay your head down, close your eyes, night night time. And like maybe they'll pat the bed and remind them, lay down your head, it's sleepy time. And just using that helping phrase to remind them what they're doing. Now, same thing for younger babies. Obviously, you're not going to be patting the bed. They're not going to really know what to do. So you're just going to remind them, it's time to relax, it's time to close your eyes, almost right here. It's okay. So I'm going to go into a little bit about how sleep can differ for children. And when you're making changes, how you might see them actually go through these changes too. So there is some really awesome research, and there is this one book called The Orchid Child and the Dandelion Child. And what this means is that some kiddos are extremely sensitive to their sleeping environment. They're sensitive to their routines. I generally see this with sensitive kids. So kids that kind of lose it really easily, kids that need something very specifically, like if they're not getting that blue cup, they're losing it, right? So very specific things. Now I find that when like most of the people that I end up working with have sensitive kids. My own child is a sensitive child. She does really well with routines. And if we go off those routines, even at 10 years old, we tend to notice, let me just say. So orchid children, this basically means, like, think about an orchid. Orchids need the right amount of temperature, they need the right amount of water, and then they'll bloom and thrive. And this really reminds me of when I lived in Colorado. We have a very dry environment there, like no humidity. And I could not get my orchids to bloom, like ever. I don't know, maybe, I don't know what I was doing wrong. Then moving to Sweden, I have orchids that I water them once a week. I don't do anything different. And they bloom like crazy. I even have people commenting constantly about how amazing my orchids always look. What are you doing? And I'm like, nothing. I water them on Sunday. That's all. So they need very specific conditions to thrive. So some kids need routines. They need their bedtime routine. They need their nap time schedule. They need all those things to thrive. I see it all the time. Once we change those small little things, boom, things get so much easier. Versus a dandelion child. Now, these are typically called like weed flowers, which they should not be. They're one, really healthy, actually. But the other thing is that, like, dandelion kiddos or dandelions, they can thrive wherever. Like, they don't need specific conditions. And you'll see kids like this all the time, where it's like, you have your friend whose baby sleeps in the stroller no matter where they are. They're not doing any sort of nap time routine. They're not stuck at home, like having to be at nap time schedule. Their kids just like, yep, whatever, cool, let's roll with this. That's a dandelion child. So they're just cool wherever they're at. As you kind of see in the picture, a dandelion can like live within the bricks. They have like no water on a regular basis. It's probably super hot on those bricks, but yet they're blooming, they're thriving, they're all good. So just notice this when you're making changes to sleep. Some kids may roll with the punches like a dandelion, and other kids may need everything laid out exactly the way it needs to be for them to thrive. Okay, so going on to night wakings. What I like to have people do is one, first and foremost, make sure your bedtime and nap time routine is moving away from whatever sleeping prop you're using. Next is having a night waking plan. I'll explain that in a second. But basically, night waking plan, when your child wakes up at night, first we're actually going to start waiting between 2 to 10 minutes before responding. The reason is because when kiddos wake up at night, sometimes they're not fully awake. Sometimes they may make noises and then fall back to sleep. And I know you're probably saying to me, no, my child would not do that. And maybe not. If they're having some sort of sleeping prop, probably not. They probably do need that help right now. So that's where changing the sleeping prop will help this, because eventually they will wake up. They may fuss for a minute or two, sometimes a few more minutes, maybe 5 max, and then fall back to sleep. I even had, I've had, when clients have like their, what's it called, like the security little cam, you know, I even have them sending me videos of where the baby's like sitting up, la 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 la, talking, and then all of a sudden they just lay back down and then fall asleep. Or even wake up, they cry for a few minutes, and then they fall back to sleep. That's a normal waking. It sucks for us parents because we get woken up and then we're really awake. And then most of the time we're going in and seeing what they need right away. So we're not giving them that time to kind of figure out how to be falling back to sleep. So I say between 2 to 10 minutes because in the beginning, yeah, you may not be ready to wait a full 10 minutes. And that sucks to have your baby upset in the middle of the night and waiting to see, okay, what's going on. So start with 2 minutes, see what you can, kind of figure out. Okay, are they needing my help right now? Okay, are the cries getting a little like, wah, quiet, ah, quiet. Wait a little bit longer. So see if you can start working up to about 10 minutes before responding, because babies generally do start realizing, I can actually fall back to sleep. So repeating the same strategies that you're using at bedtime. Okay, what this means is, so if your baby's fussing still after, let's say, 5 minutes, you go in and then you go do the exact same thing you did at bedtime. So let's say you're rocking and you're helping fall asleep. Patting and then putting back down. Now, again, that's going to be quite a process of doing those things for a little bit of time until your baby starts falling asleep a little bit more and more on their own and they don't need as much of that help. Now, times for feeding. This tends to be a really tricky one because feeding to sleep is generally a big sleep prop. So what I recommend parents doing is choosing 1 to 2 times max for feedings at nighttime. Now, this is not for babies under 4 months. 4 months, you feed them. That's just what's happening at that age. They need that food, feed them. Going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, babies that young, they should not need food every hour. That's definitely one thing you can then work on trying to help put them to sleep, is holding and rocking. They do need that closeness. So please know that, babies around 4 to 5 months, this is a little bit different because they do need that closeness and they do need that feeding. So when you're choosing those 1 to 2 times for feeding with older kiddos, don't wait to respond. So say, for example, generally when I work with parents, they have like a 1 a.m. time, and then sometimes it's a 4 a.m. time as well. So choose that 1 a.m. and that 4 a.m. time, and you don't wait those 2 minutes or however long you're waiting. You just immediately wake up, you look at the clock, okay, it's around 1-ish. You go, you feed, and then they go back to sleep. So totally fine with all of that. So we're not skipping feedings. I generally tend to keep feedings longer than most recommendations. Using the other thing is using other strategies to fall asleep at other wake ups, kind of like how I'd mentioned before. So on those other times that's not like technically a feeding time, use other soothing strategies. Using that holding and just rocking, patting, that's totally fine. Okay. The other thing that's really helpful is having a waking plan for which parent will do what at night. So some parents choose, all right, tonight's your night, I get to sleep, you're taking care of it. Or some parents take up until, that 1 a.m. feeding, and then the next parent takes on the second half of the night. So have a plan. I always recommend that because you're not waking up in the middle of the night being like, oh, no, it's your turn. No, it's your turn. Or one parent's always doing all of it all the time. So have a plan. And if you are the parent that's doing everything, I mean, I was that parent. My husband was actually working 2 jobs at the time when we had our daughter. We were starting a business and he was working a lot. So I was the parent that did everything. But that was we knew that. So I knew that I would be getting up, and then that's just how it went. And that's okay. Sometimes that's how it goes. Okay, so we're kind of getting towards the end here, the sleep roller coaster. So sleep is like a roller coaster. Sometimes you're going to have a fantastic period of time and you're like, oh, everything's amazing. And then all of a sudden, boom, it's all living hell all over again. I remember that happened to me constantly. I was like finally making strides, and then we like take 30 steps backwards. I'm going to explain why. So, road bumps along the way. Obviously, illness is going to throw things off. Babe is not going to feel great. Most of the time, there's stuffy noses and just not feeling awesome. But we know how it feels to be having a cold or something, right? You don't feel great. Don't sleep great either. So illness throws things off. Developmental times. I cannot stress this enough. There are so many developmental times that you will see that all of a sudden things were going okay, and then boom, cranky, clingy, crying. What the heck? Developmental times. I even have some oh no, sorry. I have that more laid out in my book, actually, not on my website. It's in my book where I actually lay out what to expect along the way at each stage of like age of development. The other thing is life changes. If you're having big changes happening and maybe you're moving during that time, obviously, like sleep's going to get disrupted. It gets disrupted for us, it gets disrupted for babies. And the same thing goes for as they get older and they start preschool. Sleep actually is going to be a little bit tricky. It may go great for the first month. You may see that like, oh, fine, this is awesome. And then boom, that month or second month, something happens. And that's just life changes. It's how we adapt to different things in our own way. So the thing though is that even during these road bumps, they will help your child get back to sleep faster. So they'll go through these periods of time and they'll be able to go back into those sleepy habits a lot easier as well. So generally, when I have parents going through like big changes like this, what I kind of like give for tips: staying calm during this time. This is really important. And I know it's not easy. I was not the best at this at that time because you're tired. You're beyond your own limits as well. So as much as you can, try to stay calm during this time. You are your child's emotional compass. You have to remember that. Like, try to stay as calm as possible. Know that they are going to be okay if they're not always happy. I know I have some parents say like, oh, I don't want my child to cry. And I'm like sitting here going that they're holding their kiddo and they're crying to fall asleep. And I'm like, well, I mean, your kiddo's crying now. They're going to be okay when they're adapting to new, healthier habits of being able to sleep. And they're also going to be healthier and you're going to be happier too once they start sleeping better stretches of nighttime as well. So being consistent is the other thing. You must be very consistent to help this new way of falling asleep set in place. And remembering that this is only a phase. So please remember, this is not forever. It does get better. This is only a very short phase of time. It feels like forever right now. I get it, but it does change. It does get better. Okay. Last thing that I want you to remember: consistency creates security and success. Remember that. If you feel like things are falling apart, think, okay, am I doing this on a consistent basis? Am I offering consistency or security for my child? And doing those things will create success. Okay, so getting to the end, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I just wanted to share this quickly that making it all the way to this end, of the webinar, thank you so much. I hope I didn't lose anybody when we had that little cut off there. But I am offering 10% off any service that I have, excluding the 15-minute calls because those are already pretty cheap. But 10% off any service. So what do I offer? I offer like the 15-minute calls. Surprisingly, we get quite a lot done in 15 minutes. I generally cover about 1 to 2 questions that you have. I look at your sleeping log. I review your sleep questionnaire that gets put in. You'll be surprised how much we can cover in 15 minutes. In fact, people are always like, "Wow, thank you. That was pretty informative just with 15 minutes." So 15 minutes does not include the 10% off, but 30-minute call, book support call. So I do have a sleep book, and that offers so much information. And I give 30-minute calls that if you have any questions going along with anything that you are working on within the book, it really helps to answer a lot of that, a lot of those questions that you might have. I also work one-on-one with parents, and that, again, 10% off. So if you're interested in seeing any more of what I offer, you can go to happysleepingbaby.com. You can see what I offer for your child's age range, or you can email me at Courtney@happysleepingbaby.com. Now, if you have, or if you were on my email list, you'll get all this information as well. And then all you have to do is just respond back to that email, and then we'll be back in touch. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to unshare my screen here. And then I see, let's see. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask while we're on the call? So just go ahead and unmute yourself, and then you can ask a question.
Yeah, Courtney, I have a question.
Okay.
We have a 3-year-old, and we have talked about her before, you and me.
Okay.
Her name is Astrid, and
Yeah,
my name is Maria. Yeah.
Yes. I can't see your
she's
last name.
3
Okay.
now.
Okay.
Yeah, Gustavsson.
Yeah. Okay. Nice to see you again.
Yes, you too.
Or here, yeah, talk with you.
Turn my camera on so you can actually see me too. Hi.
Oh, hi. Yes, of course I recognize you.
Yeah. Yeah, so Astrid is doing really well with her bedtime routine. She goes to sleep independently. She has her little sleep buddy, and she's
perfect.
She's fine. We say, "Good night, Astrid." We leave the room, and she goes to sleep on her own. So that's great. But she does have night wakings. So she wakes up and she wants us to come in, basically. And she sits up, she calls for us. And if we come, she lies down basically on her own. And she wants us to put her blanket on, basically.
Yeah.
And this happens several times per night. Mm-hmm. So just, I mean, I saw your plan for night wakings, but it seemed a little bit more towards smaller kids. Do you have any advice for bigger?
Okay, yes, because you guys probably already have, like, did you say she's falling asleep on her own, or how does she fall asleep at night?
She grabs her sleep buddy and she lies down, and we leave the room and she falls asleep.
Okay. Okay, has anything changed recently for her? Has she like moved to different like preschool or anything like that? Have you guys moved?
And we moved during the summer, but this has been kind of a consistent to the last year. So it's nothing sudden or new about this.
Okay, and what happens if you don't go in?
Well, she gets more and more upset and starts crying, and then after a while she's up. Usually we just have to go there. She lies down and falls asleep again, so it's easy. Mm-hmm. But if she gets more upset, she can stay awake for a longer time, like an hour or something.
Okay, yeah, this is okay. Off the top of my head, I mean, yeah, I would want to know. I mean, we've worked together, so yeah, I'm not gonna lie, this gets tricky at this age. what tends to happen is there's a lot of separation anxiety.
Mm.
They need that security. They need that extra support. I know my daughter, she around that age, she was always doing that as well. About how many times a night does she get up though?
Oh, it's from 1 to maybe, I mean, maximum, I would say 6. It depends. She usually falls back to sleep pretty quickly, and it happens maybe 2 times or 3 times.
Okay.
But sometimes she's awake for a while, and then she cries for us maybe every 15 minutes for an hour and a half. But then that's not so common. It's the normal situation that it happens maybe 2 or 3 times per night.
Okay.
And then she
Do you
just
have
goes
like
back to sleep as soon as we come.
Okay. Okay. I mean, in many ways, that's great, to be honest.
Yeah,
That
and it's
she's able
easy.
to fall asleep. Exactly. She's able to fall asleep. It
Yeah.
just sucks in your situation because you have to be the one getting up. You have to be the one doing that. So that is a bummer for sure. What comes to my mind, do you have like sometimes like when you have the like little cameras, you can kind of speak through the camera. Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, she hates that. She gets so scared. We have one of those. And we have also tried talking to her from the door, like from behind the closed door, from outside her room. But then the following day she says, you cannot talk to me through the camera or through the door when I wake up. But we have stopped when she has.
Yeah, this is a tricky one. I mean, sometimes there is gonna be times where you just have to offer that comfort and support. I really, I mean, of course there are ways that you can say, like, okay, we aren't coming in, and you just kind of ignore it and let it be, to be honest. I mean, that would be one of the steps that a lot of sleep consultants would take. I mean, and some parents do that where they just say, no, like, no more night, you don't get up, we don't come in, like, or you say, okay, we come in one time, and then after that, it's sleepy time. And being a little bit more strict with that. So, I mean, if that's what you're open to, you can go that way. I tend to be more a little bit on the soft side because I do think kids need a lot more support. So I would, allow just that help because she is going to sleep quite quickly. So you go in, you give her that security, and then you're off to bed again. Because to be honest, it's going to change, I would say, within the next like 3 or 4, max 6 months, because she's getting older. She's not going to need that. So it really depends on your comfort level of how strict do you want to be in this situation. And if you want to get a little bit more strict and say, no, I'll come in one time per night. And after that, then I either talk to you through the door or I talk to you through the thing. That's it. One time per night. Mama needs her sleep too. And I don't think that's a bad thing to let kids know that, like, you also need sleep. Right?
Yeah.
And also talking about, like, hey, if I don't get sleep, do you notice how cranky Mama gets? I mean, like, that would be my situation. Like, if I don't sleep, I get cranky too. I'm not as happy. Don't you feel that way too when you wake up? So, she's old enough to be able to talk a little bit more about feelings and how she's feeling. Have you asked her why does she wake up? What does she need? Like, what's the reason for the waking up? Since she is older?
She just says that she wants us to come.
Okay.
So I don't think that she thinks it's morning. It's not that, and I think she just wants company. So sometimes we tried a little bit for a while to have her baby sister sleep with her, and that helped her, I think, to feel less lonely. But then they kind of disturbed each other too much. The little one woke up too much, but now she's getting better at sleeping also. So so maybe we'll try that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, just make your choice as to how strict you want to keep things.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good luck. I hope that helped a little bit.
Thank you.
And I hope that, you can start getting a few more hours of sleep in a row.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone else have I see Caroline, you unmuted, so yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question or suggestion, or if you can do something about, as with Maria, like with the toddlers and older children,
Okay.
because we have a baby on the way and we have almost a 2-year-old at home. So like, how do you, get the older one to sleep in their bed the whole night because you're gonna have the baby, and like, juggling those two kids. So like, it would be really nice if you could have a seminar in regards to toddlers and how they sleep and how you will be able to get them through the night in their own bed and etc. That would be really nice.
Well, a lot of everything I talk to applies to toddlers.
Okay.
Everything. I mean, this is the starting point. So this isn't just for babies. This is any age.
Okay. Good.
So that's, you'd start with, okay, how does your kiddo go to sleep, getting in the right routines, all that, all of this stuff that we talked about today, all applies to that age. So,
Okay.
So I mean, obviously that goes into a little bit more of a deeper topic, right? If we're talking about how exactly to be going to sleep step by step, that would be more of like, that's what I offer in my book. That's what I offer in my personal coaching of, okay, how do we make it to the next step there? But everything that we talked about today will help. It will apply, because that's the first place I start with everybody.
Okay.
That's actually, you have to have the ground down before we actually move into the next steps of that anyways.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps answer your question a bit. Okay. All right. Good. Anybody else?
I have a question
Okay.
also. I have an 18-month-old.
Okay.
She's my second, and what she does now, but she has been doing it on and off from the birth, I would say, is that if she wakes up at night, she stays awake for 2 hours. She's fine if you are with her. She's not crying. It's just that she cannot sleep. I'm not sure if she's rested, and she doesn't need to be held or anything, just to be with her in the room. And the second I leave the room, she will cry again. So independently if she wakes up because of a noise or by herself, she cannot go back to sleep if it does it for 2 hours, after 2 hours or something. So I'm not sure what to do with that.
Okay. Well, this all goes back into setting up what we talked about today again. So, how does she usually fall asleep for night times and naps? How does she usually like?
Yeah, because with my first, we had many problems with sleep, like you said with your daughter. I was, pretty. Yeah, I have read everything. I have consulted other people. So we have a good plan. She sleeps at 7. We just read, and then I put her to bed, and I sing to her, and I leave the room, and she's fine. And she will
Okay.
go to
So
sleep.
she falls asleep independently, all on her own.
Yeah, she has a pacifier though, but that she can. She doesn't lose it. She doesn't wake because of that. She always has it in her mouth. And from the birth until now, or until at least 16 months, she was doing great. She was having just one eating until 10 months. Then she stopped that, and then she was sleeping perfectly fine. And after 16 months, she started waking more and more once at night for these 2 hours.
Okay. So around the 16, 18-month mark, she also hits a pretty big developmental stage. So it could be that she's in that developmental stage during this time that's causing those wake ups. The other thing is looking at how many naps she's getting during the day. How is she, maybe she's napping too much, to be honest. And then she's more awake at nighttime because she's getting too much daytime sleep. The other thing is, I know that you're saying that like the pacifier isn't affecting her sleep, but I that would be one of the things that I actually start getting rid of pretty soon, because
Okay.
what happens with pacifiers is that when they're in the mouth, so your brain goes into that light sleep, deep sleep, REM, back into light. And then when you're sucking on that pacifier, even if it's still in the mouth, your brain wakes up, right? The brain wakes up because you're like, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm awake. Oh yeah, oh, a pacifier. So the brain actually wakes up a lot more when we have a pacifier. We're not in full restful sleep during
Mhm.
that time. So I would actually say look at daytime sleep, make sure that she's on a good schedule for her age.
Okay.
Again, pacifier. And then look to see if she's in a developmental stage. This could just be one of those windows of time where she has a developmental stage where it disturbs sleep, and then after that she'll be back to, good habits again of
Yeah.
sleeping.
Do you have any tip when I am at that point when she has waking up and she doesn't go back to sleep for 2 hours? Because if it was, for a few minutes, I wouldn't have a problem to go back and forth. But for that, I don't know what to do, how to handle that.
And she sleeps in a separate room, so you're not able to just let her be.
Yes, exactly.
And so if you leave the room and she knows that you're in the room,
Yes, she cries and I go in. Of course, I'm not waiting for so many minutes that you said, so maybe I will do that. That is what I thought
yeah,
initially, to see if she will calm by herself. I go in, she calms down immediately, and I say to her, okay, now I'm leaving the room. So I'm not leaving, in secret
mhm.
in a way. And she might be okay for 2, 3 minutes, and then she starts crying again. Maybe
Okay. And then
because
what do you
she
do
might
when you
fall
go back
asleep.
in?
The same again and again and again.
I would actually wait a little bit longer,
Mm.
because you might be causing her to stay awake.
I think so too. That she wants me to be there, so she
Yeah.
doesn't sleep in order to be with me.
hmm
But
So
then she
yeah, I would
cries,
wait
so I don't
longer.
know.
Is the room dark, quiet,
Yeah, yeah.
dark
Well,
enough?
it's not 100% quiet, and because her sister is sleeping also there. So I'm not sure if she moves a lot because we have a bunk bed and
Okay.
she's on
I would put
she's
like a white noise machine or something in the
oh,
room that could help.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in this case, it sounds like it's almost overstimulating for her that you're there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not allowing her to fall back to sleep. So I would wait a little bit longer, try with some white noise, and see if that can help. Developmental stage, again, that could be a lot of the issue as well. So
But
try these
this
things.
will go away by itself, you mean?
A lot of the times, yeah.
Yeah.
As
The,
long as
the
we're
only
not
thing is
like
that I'm worried not to put, a bad habit of her
exactly.
needing me.
Wait, you're worried that you're gonna damage her, like if she's
Like damage her sleep because she will have like a new, like you said, negative
yeah,
prompt.
yep, exactly. And that's when generally when we have a developmental stage, we tend to do other things to help sleep again, and then we incorporate kind of more sleep props or habits or something like that that's harder to break afterwards. So just be really aware of, okay, am I um don't add something else in. And I actually think you're causing more of her to be like continuing to be awake. So I mean, like, be in there. I mean, in the beginning, it just be quiet though. Try leaving without saying anything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if her sister's in there too, I mean, I'm kind of worried that's even waking up the other child. But yeah, I mean, try leaving without saying anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Okay.
hopefully those things can help as well.
Thank you.
Again, I mean, like, yeah, we could check it. Any of these questions really go a little bit deeper into knowing more specifics about each individual child. So like a 30-minute call could help a lot as well, just to kind of like narrow some of those things down.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you.
But I hope today was helpful. So thank you, everyone. We're going to wrap it all up here. And again, if you have any other questions, visit my site, happysleepingbaby.com, and we can get in touch and then continue working on whatever the sleep issue is. So thanks again for everything, and we'll be back in touch soon.